Hello, friends. My name is Matt. I'm the youth and family pastor at Cornerstone Church in Marshfield, and I'm here today with your Cornerstone Connection, a daily devotional. So, I'm going to just start our time this morning in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 14. If you'd like to get there, we're going to be in verses 13 through 21. I'm going to read you a story that perhaps you've heard before. If you've been in church for almost any amount of time, you probably have heard this story. Or if you've, of course, read through the Gospels, you've heard it. So let me read it to you, and then I just want to pull a couple things out of there that I think are important that we can apply to our lives. So here we go, Matthew chapter 14, verses 13 to 21. Here's what it says. Now, when Jesus heard this, and let me just pause for a moment. What did Jesus just hear? Well, Jesus heard that his good friend John the Baptist has died. He was killed. And he was now buried. And so this is the news that Jesus has just heard at this point. Now, when Jesus heard this, he withdrew from there in a boat to a desolate place by himself. But when the crowds heard it, they followed him on foot from the towns. When he went ashore and he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion on them, and he healed their sick. Now when it was evening, the disciples came to him, and they said, "This is a desolate place, and the day is now over. Send the crowds away to go into the villages and buy food for themselves." But Jesus said, "They need not go away. You get them something to eat." They said to him, "We have only 5 loaves here and 2 fish." And he said, "Bring them here to me." Then he ordered the crowds to sit down on the grass, and taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven, and he said a blessing. Then he broke the loaves, and he gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the crowds. And they all ate and were satisfied. And they took up 12 baskets full of the broken pieces left over. And those who ate were about 5,000 men, besides women and children. Again, a very popular story that you have probably heard in your lifetime. And my guess is, if you are looking at a Bible at this point, that section of text is called Jesus Feeds the 5,000. Now, a bonus thing that I want to share with you, I'm going to share 2 main things with you, 2 main thoughts out of this story with you today, but a bonus thing I want to share with you, you probably heard this from commentators, Bible scholars, or other pastors in the past. The crowd that Jesus fed that day was more than 5,000. Perhaps you caught it at the end of the text. It says that there was 5,000 men that day, besides women and children. So scholars will say that with that, let's say many of the men were married, there's a good chance that there was 10 to 15,000 people there that day. That's incredible, and that's a lot of fish, and that's a lot of bread coming from 5 loaves and 2 fish. Now that's just important to realize. Now the main thing that I want to share with you, the first of the 2 main things that I want to share with you, is what often gets lost in this story. In verse 14, it says that when Jesus went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion on them. But it doesn't say right after he had compassion on them that he chose to feed them, does it? No, he did something else that day, and I think we often lose this part of the story. Jesus chose that when he had compassion on them, he chose to heal all of their sick. Now, let's put this into perspective. If you live in Marshfield like I do, you live in a town of 19 to 20,000 people. And whenever I go into the hospital or the clinic on any given day, there's tons of people in there. They're being seen for all kinds of different things, whether it's a sickness, a disease, a surgery, whatever it is. They're being seen. And there's tons of people on any given day in a town of 19 to 20,000. Now, in a group of 10 to 15,000, I'd assume it's around the same amount coming to Jesus that day. And he heals all of their sick. So let's not lose that. Jesus didn't just feed these people, but he spent time, after just hearing this terrible news about his good friend John the Baptist, he spent time healing all of their sick, a ton of people. That's number 1. Let's not miss that. Number 2, I love this. It says that Jesus says in verse 16, as the disciples say, "Hey, tell these people to go away," Jesus says, "They need not go away. You give them something to eat." You know, you and I, if we are Christians, followers of Christ, we serve a God who invites us into doing the miraculous with him. And so it makes me ask myself and ask you today, when's the last time you said yes to that? Even if you only had 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish, and God said, you give them something to eat, were you willing to hand that off to God and say, okay, God, let's do this? Isn't it amazing that the God of the universe, who's holy and set apart, would allow you and I to participate with him in doing the miraculous? Well, he does. I've seen it over and over again in big ways and small ways in my own life. And I'm sure you have too. We'd love to hear about it. Would you share it in the comments or the chats below? How has God done the miraculous and even invited you to participate in it? Friends, he's always doing more than we can ever imagine. He's not only feeding, he's healing. He's not doing it all by himself. He's inviting you and I, who are imperfect, not holy, to be a part of his perfect plan. Let's join him as he invites us. Have a great day, friends. We'll see you next time on the Cornerstone Connection.